In this video, we're going to look at setting up a basic audio recording setup for when you're making your videos. First, let's go over what we're going to be using. So for this, we're going to do a simple just stereo audio recording. Obviously, if you'd like, you can put extra microphones, close mic things. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to set up 2 microphones in a stereo pattern. So the microphones that we'll be using are this pair of Rode M5 condenser microphones. We also have a stereo bar, which we will use to attach the microphones to. We have a Scarlett 2i2 interface, which is what we'll be plugging our microphones into. We'll be using a computer with audio recording software on it. For this video, we'll be using Logic Pro. We have 2 XLR cables, which are microphone cables. And I don't remember if I mentioned it before, but we have our microphone stand, which we'll be setting up our stereo bar and 2 microphones on. So first, we're going to want to set up our microphone stand. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find this little twist screw that is holding the kind of legs and base. And you're going to want to loosen it, bring it down until it doesn't go down anymore. Then you're going to want to tighten it. One very important thing to note is just you should never crank these, never tighten them as tight as you can get them, because that's how they break. So just tighten it until it's tight and secure. Next, this is a tripod stand. So you're just going to want to pull the legs out, and then the stand will stand up nice and easy. Since we're going to be using 2 microphones in a stereo pattern, and that's all we're doing for the sake of this setup, we're not going to have the microphone stand at any sort of angle. Obviously, if you wanted to close mic something, you could adjust the angle to wherever you want the microphone pointed at. But for the sake of this video, we're going to loosen the boom arm so that the part of the microphone stand that the pair of mics will be attached to is facing straight up and down. And then to adjust the height, you could take this piece, loosen it enough, and then raise or lower it to the height that you want it to be. So before we attach our microphones, we're going to want to attach something like this. This is called a stereo bar, and you can see it has the ability of holding 2 microphones on it rather than 1. These attach simply. You just put them on, and then you hand tighten them. Oh, I messed that up. You hand tighten them. Once again, do not tighten it too much, or else you're going to break it. You're just going to tighten it so it's tight enough. Now we have the space to put our 2 microphones to record our stereo. So now you can see I've gone ahead and set up my microphones in a stereo pattern. This is what's called an XY pattern. Basically what that means is you have the tips of the microphones, I didn't do it quite right, but the tips of the microphones both pointed in opposite directions, but they're overlapping a little bit to avoid phasing. And if you look at it, they're at approximately a 90-degree angle. And you can see the way I've attached it as I've put each clip on each side, and I tightened it using these little tightening knobs at the bottom. So when we plug in our microphones, because this microphone is pointed towards the left, and this microphone is pointed towards the right, this is going to be our left, and that is going to be our right. So when we're plugging in our microphones, we're going to be using XLR cables like this. And as you can see, the microphones themselves have what's called outie prongs because the prongs face outward. So you're going to want to make sure you're grabbing the end of your microphone cord that has the innie, called innie, which is the holes that the prongs go into. Also, one important thing to note that I didn't earlier is that when you're setting your setting up a stereo pair of microphones, you're going to want to make sure that they have the same pickup pattern. These are both picking up cardioid. And also you're going to want to make sure that they're ideally a matched pair, but if not a matched pair, they're at the very least the same make and model microphone, or else your left and your right are going to sound different, and it's going to not be good for your recording. So now that we have our XLR cables plugged into our microphones, we're going to want to now plug our microphones into our interface. So we're going to take the other end of our XLR, the end with the prongs, and we're going to plug it into our interface. Because this is the microphone that's pointing left. Left usually goes first, so we're going to plug it into input 1. And then we're going to plug our right microphone into input 2. Okay. And also you're going to want to make sure that the input level or gain is down to 0. And then lastly, because we are using condenser microphones, that means that they require phantom power. So to turn that on, you're just going to find the button that says 48 volts, and you're just going to click it. Oh. There we go. And you can see on this interface, it's lit up red, meaning you know that phantom power is on, and you know that your microphones are receiving power. One thing to note is you should never plug or unplug XLR cables while phantom power is on. If you do that, you could fry the inputs and they'll stop working. Next, we're going to want to set up our recording software. Like I said earlier, we're going to be using Logic Pro, and we're going to want to create a channel for each of our microphones. So since we're using 2 microphones, we're going to be using inputs 1 and 2. Because this is a stereo pair, you could either record a single track in stereo or 2 mono tracks, 1 for each microphone. I'm just going to record in stereo because they're the same microphone, and any sort of processing that I put on this recording, I'm going to want to be applied to both tracks. So we're going to set up our stereo, and depending on how many mics you plugged in, you'll set up a track for each one. We're going to click Create, and there we have our track. I always like to name my tracks. I'm just going to call this Rode M5 stereo pair. Sorry, trying to type with one hand. That way I know exactly what I'm recording, and I'm able, when I go to edit my recording later, I know exactly what each track is. So next you're going to want to set the gain level for each of your microphones. Because we're using a stereo pair, both of these input levels are going to be the exact same number, or else you're going to get an unbalanced recording. However, if you're using more microphones or doing some close miking, these numbers are probably going to be a little bit different. So because we don't have a player in front of the microphone to test it, normally what you'd do is you'd have them play, and as they play, you would slowly, very gradually, turn up the input levels until you're seeing a kind of healthy amount of signal over in your track. Obviously it's picking up my voice a little bit, but if I were to sort of snap in front of the microphones, you can see that we're getting some signal there. You can see it there, you can see it here, you can see it in the mixing view if you hit X. And you'd also be able to see that on these little green lights that flash. If the signal is too hot, you're gonna see these turn yellow and then turn red. Red is really bad. Red means you're peaking. So if you see that the level is just really high in the green over here, or it's getting into the yellow and the red, you can just turn them down a little bit. Because if you clip your microphone in your recording, you won't be able to remove that distortion. So that's your basic audio recording setup. When you're recording with video, lastly, the thing I wanted to mention is that because you're going to be lining up audio and video, it's a good idea when you start a take to clap your hands together once. That way you can line up that attack sound with the audio from your camera and the audio captured in your recording software, which will just make your life so much easier when you go to edit the video or when you ever have somebody else editing for you. So that is setting up an audio setup.